what I hadn't expected when I started the company was that there was going to be this spiritual, philosophical change in the way that game developers want to build games. And I think for Karen, for me, as young parents and as folks who've grown up with the internet in the way that it sort of exists today, it's so different from our parents and the way that they saw the internet and whatever they necessarily knew of what we were doing on the internet. And I think that's a community shift in how the game developers today think about how they want to build for young audiences. And so putting aside all of the regulation, I just think there's a change. I think there's a change in how in attitudes around how game developers today want to build, and thinking about this as part of a component of what you should be thinking about from day one, and having that strong foundation. And so I would say actually today, what Karen and Stephen have done with Magic Potion is becoming more of the norm, where developers are reaching out to us earlier and earlier in that development cycle. In some cases when it's just an idea, and building around, okay, if we want to go global, we want to have an inclusive environment for kids and teens globally, how do we do that? How do we make sure, when we're even thinking about, do we do in-app purchase? Do we do subscriptions? All of those sorts of things. And so I think that's why I've had so much fun working with Karen, because they're the conversations we have as different things are being thought about or tested or rolled out. Hey, we're thinking about this, we're thinking about that. Karen and I connect all the time on Slack to chat about those sorts of things, and that they were the conversations we were having when Karen was building out the account flows. I remember reviewing all of the Figmas and everything that was coming through, and then even now when we think about the future of the game and the future of the industry. So I think that's what gets me excited, is so much of this is moving upstream, which makes us more valuable. And as Karen said, it's much cheaper and more cost efficient to think about it at the beginning rather than discovering later on that you need to change your monetization strategy because you now can't engage with a younger audience.
I would add on to that and say that in my day-to-day, and maybe it's just because I'm living in it more now, is that other verticals are also embracing community on an earlier stage, right? Whether it be in my town, a local group of moms trying to figure out what to do with this, or whether it be in a fintech app, people are talking online about different trades that they can make. I think other verticals are starting to see that there's an importance to working with your community, to building from within your community. And I think it's kind of a shift. And I don't know why I thought about this the other day, but it's almost like the anti-COVID in a way, where, hey, now we're all coming back together and we're trying to make these community events, whether they be virtual or in person. But I think community is on the rise and all over the place. And I think people want to be working together. They want to find like minds so they can share ideas, they can grow. And I think people are starting to see the value in things like that. So I wanted to do my fireball round, but I wanted to change it up to make it a little bit more community clubhouse focused. So my question will start with Karen. Kieran, it will be the same question. It would be, do you remember your first community clubhouse, and was there a moment that you remember the most about it?
My first community clubhouse would have been me and Stephen doing our talk at GDC.
Is Karen frozen?
Oh, am I?
Kieran, we'll start with you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I mean, for me, GDC last year was when all this took off, and I think what was exciting about that for me was a lot of the questions that were coming about from the community, and everyone was there, was all around, hey, how do we do this? How do we make this work? How do we incorporate this into the games that we're thinking of building today, the games we want to build, and how can we actually make that more valuable for our user community, but how can we be creative about it? And so actually some of the things we've introduced in some games since have come about directly from conversations we had. And I'll give you a specific example, which was, hey, you know how in some markets, some states, some countries, chat needs to be off, but what could we replace chat with? And so we've since seen creatively developers that have taken some of our technology say, hey, what are the ideas that we could use to replace chat with, to make it more fun for kids. And so some of those are now starting to come to market, and so you can read about some of those things. But that directly came from conversations that we were having at a community clubhouse. So it definitely holds a sweet place in my heart.
That's awesome, just to hear that an actual thing came out of that conversation that happened at community clubhouse. That's so awesome, and thank you for sharing that, Karen.
Yeah, my first community clubhouse was Stephen and I's talk about Magic Potion Games, the next Club Penguin for the new generation. So that was incredibly fun. It was such a fun chat, and we had a bunch of old Club Penguin employees fly in that we didn't even know were coming. Lane Merrifield, the creator of Club Penguin, flew in for the chat, so that was pretty funny, talking all about just a lot of similar things, how we're kind of approaching Imagine Island and how it's kind of, manifesting that magic of Club Penguin in a new way. And it was funny at the end, all these, young adults were standing up to ask questions, and they all started with like these really heartfelt thank yous about Club Penguin and how impactful it was in their life, which was just another reminder of how deep that really did go and how widespread that effect was from the Club Penguin days. But it was so funny hearing someone say, "Oh, I just want to thank you so much, for Club Penguin. It really changed my life." And they didn't know that Lane Merrifield was sitting right beside them. And I'm like, I don't feel right saying you're welcome, because the actual creator is right beside you. And of course, Stephen and I were one of hundreds of people that made the magic of Club Penguin what it was. So, but it was really sweet, and just a good reminder that those are really, really long tail effects that like a good wholesome product can have on a generation of kids. And here they all are now wanting to create games themselves. So it's really cool.
It's awesome that you're building a kid friendly game, right, or a kid based game, because it will have that same impact in 10 or so years, right? It's so cool to be able to go to these conferences, and when you have younger people in gaming, like these are the games that they grew up with, and they get to meet their heroes, for lack of better words, or maybe just not even know that their hero's sitting right next to you or behind you, right? Like it's so cool to be able to hear that, and I love that you can share that with these other gamers, right? Because again, this was probably their first introduction to gaming for a lot of them.
Yeah, and especially as a young parent, a parent of young kids, like if we do get to provide that next wholesome, impactful, meaningful thing to like the next generation of kids that include our own kids, that's like legacy level stuff right there. Like that just makes my heart skip a beat. If we can do that, what an incredible thing to leave behind for our kids and their whole generation of kids. That's the goal. That's like the North Star here.
So, Kieran, last year when we spoke, you were doing a GoldenEye speed run. So the new question is, what game are you currently playing?
I've actually been playing Crash 4 with my 9-year-old. So they have a pass and play function built into that title, and so you trade every time every time Crash dies or falls off something. And so we've been working our way through that. And when we started, I would get handed the controller because he would say, "Dad, this part is too difficult. You need to do it." Now it's the opposite. So I will hand it back to him, and he's the one that's doing the hard bits.
That
I
is
think
awesome. Is that Crash Bandicoot?
Yeah,
One of my
yeah,
all-time faves. Yep.
I
so
think
good.
Crash is one of those first games that makes you feel old, because when you go back to it, you have to be so twitchy in your fingers that, like, I think you have to be under a certain age to be able to do certain parts of